The signal came through at 2:47 a.m., scrambling every computer screen in the Deep Space Communications Array facility. Dr. Rebecca Stone had been reviewing data from the Mars probe when her monitor went black, then filled with symbols that looked nothing like any human language. She sat up straight, her tired eyes suddenly wide awake. "Everyone, I need you here right now," she called across the control room. 3 other scientists rushed to her station, their faces reflecting the strange blue glow of the alien characters scrolling across the screen. "Is this a joke?" asked Timothy Wells, the youngest member of their team. "Someone hacking our system?" Rebecca shook her head. "The signal is coming from space. Real space. And it's moving." Her fingers flew across the keyboard trying to trace the source. Somewhere between Mars and Jupiter. The alien text suddenly shifted and a sound filled the room. It was clearly a voice speaking words they could not understand. But the tone was unmistakable. Fear, desperation, the universal sound of someone calling for help. For the next 6 hours, Rebecca and her team worked without stopping. They ran the signal through every translation program they had, compared it against mathematical patterns, looked for anything that might give them a clue. Finally, around 9 in the morning, they had something. "It's a distress call," Rebecca announced to her exhausted team. "A ship, they're stranded in our solar system. Life support is failing. They have 3,000 people on board." 3,000. Timothy stared at the numbers on the screen. "Where were they going?" "That's the strange part." Rebecca pulled up another file. "They weren't supposed to come here at all. Look at this." She pointed to a series of coordinates. "They were trying to reach something called Station Helix 7, but their navigation sent the signal here instead. To Earth, so they don't even know they called us. No, they think they're talking to their own people. To some kind of military rescue team." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Earth had just received the first confirmed message from intelligent alien life, and it was a cry for help meant for someone else, someone with better technology, someone who actually knew what they were doing in space. "We have to respond," Rebecca said quietly. "We have to tell them we got their message." "And say what exactly?" asked Dr. Henry Foster, who had been quiet until now. "Sorry, wrong number. Good luck dying out there." Rebecca turned to face him. "We tell them we're coming. Coming. Rebecca, we barely have 3 functioning spacecraft that can reach the moon reliably. These people are in the asteroid belt. That's millions of miles away. We don't have faster than light travel. We don't have whatever technology they have. We can't possibly. We have 36 hours before their life support fails completely," Rebecca interrupted. "I'm not saying we definitely can save them. I'm saying we have to try." Within an hour, she was on a video call with NASA headquarters, the heads of SpaceX, and representatives from space agencies around the world. She showed them the alien message, the translation, and the cold hard facts. A ship full of refugees was dying in their solar system, and Earth was the only one who could reach them in time. "This is insane," someone from the European Space Agency said. "We've never attempted anything like this. The risks are enormous." 3,000 lives, Rebecca replied. 3,000 people who will die if we do nothing. "Yes, it's risky. Yes, we might fail. But we have rockets. We have supplies. We have smart people who can solve problems. What we don't have is an excuse to sit here and do nothing when we can at least try." The debate raged for hours, bouncing between committees and agencies. But something strange happened. News of the alien distress call leaked to the public, and suddenly the whole world was watching. Messages poured in from everywhere. Regular people offering to help, to donate, to do whatever was needed. The pressure mounted until finally the decision was made. Earth would attempt a rescue mission. SpaceX immediately began preparing 3 starships, loading them with anything that might help. Medical supplies, oxygen tanks, tools, spare parts, food, water. Engineers pulled double shifts, modifying the spacecraft for a journey they were never designed to make. The International Space Station shifted its orbit to serve as a waypoint. Russia offered fuel. China provided additional life support systems. India contributed navigation technology. Rebecca sent a response to the alien ship. She kept it simple, using basic mathematical concepts to show that someone had received their message and was coming. She did not try to explain that Earth was not the military station they expected. She did not mention that humans had never done anything like this before. She just sent coordinates and a time estimate. 30 hours. The reply came back within minutes. More alien text, but this time Rebecca could see what looked like coordinates and specifications. The aliens were sending them information about their ship, about the damage, about what was wrong. They were treating Earth like a professional rescue team because they had no reason to think otherwise. Captain Doran of the Windseeker vessel studied the reply from Station Helix 7 with confusion. The response was primitive, using old mathematical code instead of modern neural transmission. Perhaps the station had damage of its own, but they were coming. That was what mattered. Help was 30 hours away. He walked through the corridors of his dying ship, past frightened refugees huddled in family groups, past crew members trying to smile and stay calm. 30 hours. They could last 30 hours. What Captain Doran did not know was that the beings coming to save them had never met an alien before, had technology that would seem like ancient history to any spacefaring civilization, and were making up most of their rescue plan as they went along. But they were coming anyway, because that's what humans do. Grant Williams checked his suit seals for the 5th time. Around him, 24 other engineers and medical staff did the same. All of them crammed into the cargo hold of the lead starship. Nobody talked much. Everyone knew they were about to attempt something impossible. Through the window, Grant could see the alien vessel growing larger. The Windseeker was huge, maybe 5 times the size of their largest spacecraft, but even from a distance he could see the damage. Scorch marks ran along one side. Several panels hung loose. One entire section looked like it had been hit by something massive. "That's a lot of broken ship," someone muttered behind him. "That's a lot of people who need us," Grant replied. The docking process took almost an hour. The Windseeker had docking ports, but they were designed for alien ships with alien technology. Grant and his team had to basically figure out how to connect a round peg to a square hole, while floating in space with nothing but their clunky suits and some creative welding. When the airlock finally opened, Grant came face to face with his first alien. Captain Doran stood over 7 feet tall with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. His face was difficult to read, but his body language screamed exhaustion and stress. Behind him, dozens of other aliens crowded the corridor, all staring at the humans with expressions that Grant could not interpret. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Grant held up a tablet showing simple pictures. A wrench, tools, a diagram of an engine. He pointed at himself, then at the pictures, then deeper into the ship. Doran's eyes widened. He looked at the primitive tablet, at the humans in their bulky suits, at their simple tools. Understanding dawned slowly and terribly. These were not coalition military engineers with advanced technology. These were not even the right species. These were the inhabitants of the primitive planet the distress call had accidentally reached, and they had come anyway. Doran made a decision in that moment. He could panic, could explain the mistake, could send these unprepared aliens away, or he could accept the help that had crossed millions of miles to reach them. He gestured for Grant and his team to follow, leading them toward the engine room. The Windseeker's engine was beyond anything Grant had ever seen. It hummed with energy he could not measure, connected by systems he did not understand, built on physics he had never studied. For a minute, he just stood there overwhelmed. Then he started looking for things he did recognize: heat, pressure, flow, damage. The fancy alien technology still followed basic rules. Energy had to go somewhere. Broken things leaked. Connections had to be solid. "Okay," he said to his team, knowing the aliens could not understand him. "It's still just engineering. Really complicated engineering, but engineering. Let's figure out what's broken and how to fix it." They worked for hours. Grant's team took apart pieces of their own spacecraft to create patches and connections. They used Earth-made welding equipment to seal cracks in alien metal. When they could not understand how something worked, they observed it carefully, made educated guesses, and tested theories. The alien crew watched in amazement. These humans worked without advanced scanners or computer guidance. They touched things, listened to sounds, felt vibrations. They argued with each other in their strange language, pointing and gesturing, somehow reaching agreements. When something did not work, they tried something else. When they ran out of proper parts, they improvised with whatever they had. "They're using tape," one alien engineer said in shock, watching a human carefully wrap something around a connection point. "Not just tape," another replied. "Look, they're using strips cut from their own suit material. They're cannibalizing their own equipment to fix ours." In another section of the ship, Dr. Amara Okonkwo worked in the medical bay with no idea what she was doing, and absolute determination to figure it out. Alien biology was nothing like human biology, but injured was still injured. Bleeding was still bleeding. Pain was still pain. She could not read the alien medical displays or use their equipment properly. So she fell back on basics. Keep airways open, stop blood loss. Treat for shock. Stabilize before trying anything fancy. She watched how the alien medical staff worked and copied their techniques. She paid attention to what made patients better or worse. When she ran out of alien medical supplies, she adapted human ones. A blood pressure cuff could measure pressure on any limb once you figured out where the pulse was. Antibiotics might not work, but keeping wounds clean was universal. Pain medication doses had to be guessed, but starting small and adjusting was better than doing nothing. Above them, pilot Amy Rodriguez manually guided the second starship into position. She had no computer assistance for this. The alien ship's docking guidance was designed for alien craft. Her instruments were not compatible, so she did it the old way, watching through the window, using small thruster bursts, relying on experience and instinct. Coming in at 0.3 meters per second, she reported calmly, though her hands were sweating inside her gloves. Contact in 10 seconds. The two spacecraft touched with barely a bump. Perfect. Inside the Windseeker, alien crew members started to understand something profound. These humans were not better equipped than the Coalition military. They were not more advanced, but they worked with a fierce determination that did not allow for failure. Every obstacle became a puzzle to solve. Every setback prompted a new approach. Why are they doing this? A young alien refugee asked Doran, watching human engineers work themselves to exhaustion. Doran did not have an answer. In Coalition space, rescue operations were jobs. Professionals did them because that was their assignment. Resources were allocated by computers. Everything was efficient and calculated, but these humans had crossed space in fragile ships, risking their own lives for people they had never met. They shared their food, their oxygen, their equipment. They treated alien refugees like family. After 12 hours of continuous work, Grant's team got the primary engine functioning at 40% capacity. Not perfect, but enough. Life support stabilized. The immediate crisis passed. Grant floated in the corridor, too tired to move. An alien child approached him cautiously, then held out something that looked like a piece of fruit. Grant took it, smiled, and took a bite. It tasted terrible, but he ate it anyway. The child smiled back. Sometimes communication did not need words. The Coalition fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, with the kind of precision that came from centuries of practice. 5 massive warships appeared in formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced alloys. Their weapon systems powerful enough to crack planets. This was the proper rescue force, arriving exactly when their calculations said they would. Admiral Torren stood in the command center of his flagship, expecting to find a disaster. The Windseeker should be a floating tomb by now, its passengers dead from life support failure, its systems cold and silent. His crew would recover the bodies, file the reports, and add another tragedy to the statistics. It was unfortunate, but sometimes rescue came too late. But his sensors showed something impossible. "Sir," his scan officer reported, voice confused. "The Windseeker is showing active power. Life support is functioning. I'm detecting multiple life signs. That's not possible. Show me visual." The main screen flickered to life and Admiral Torren stared in disbelief. The Windseeker was damaged but operational. But that was not the strangest part. Attached to the refugee vessel like parasites were 3 small spacecraft that looked like they had been built in someone's garage. They were crude, primitive things held together with welds and bolts, powered by chemical rockets that belonged in a museum, and floating between the ships, in spacesuits that made Coalition equipment look like magic, were dozens of beings that the Admiral did not recognize. "What species is that?" he demanded. His crew scrambled to check databases. "Unknown, sir. Not in our records. They appear to be from the planet in this system. The one marked as pre-spaceflight civilization. The humans? Yes, sir. According to our outdated charts, they should not have space capability for another 200 years. Admiral Torren watched as one of the humans maneuvered using nothing but small jets of compressed gas, carrying what looked like scrap metal toward the Windseeker. Another one was leading a group of alien refugees through an improvised tunnel between ships. A third was outside the hull doing repairs with hand tools. "Get me Captain Doran now." The communication came through a moment later. Captain Doran appeared on screen looking exhausted but alive. Behind him, the Admiral could see human crew members working alongside his people. "Captain, what is your status?" "Admiral Torin," Doran said, relief clear in his voice. "We are stable. Engines are functioning at 40%. Life support is restored. We have 16 serious injuries, but the human medical staff has them stabilized. Everyone is alive. The humans did this?" "Yes, sir. They arrived 29 hours ago and have been working continuously since. They took apart their own spacecraft to repair ours. They shared their supplies with our refugees. They saved us." Admiral Torin closed his eyes briefly. This was going to create so much paperwork. "Captain, you understand that planet is classified as pre-contact. There are protocols, regulations. The humans should not even know we exist." "With respect, Admiral, the humans do not care about our protocols. They received our distress call and responded. That is all." 3 hours later, Admiral Torin found himself aboard the Windseeker, walking through corridors filled with alien refugees who were very much alive. He passed human crew members who looked ready to collapse from exhaustion, still checking on repair work. In the medical bay, he saw a human doctor examining an alien patient using equipment that seemed barely more advanced than the tools his ancestors might have used. Grant Williams was in the engine room when the Admiral found him, covered in grease and foreign substances, using a wrench to tighten a connection that probably should have required a molecular fusion tool. "You are the chief engineer?" Torin asked through a translation device. Grant looked up at the towering alien military officer. "I'm an engineer. Don't know about chief. We've all been doing our best. Your best involved using primitive tools to repair technology you cannot possibly understand." "Yeah, well, we figured out enough to make it work." Grant set down his wrench. "Look, I know we're not supposed to be here. I know we probably broke about 1,000,000 of your rules. But those people needed help, and we were the only ones close enough to provide it. So we did. You risked your lives for aliens you had never met, using equipment that could have failed at any moment, with no guarantee of success. That's pretty much the job description." "Yeah." Admiral Torin studied this small, tired human covered in alien engine fluid. "In Coalition space, rescue operations are performed by trained professionals using approved equipment and following established protocols. Civilians do not involve themselves in such matters. Why not?" The question was so simple it took Torin by surprise. "Because it is inefficient, dangerous because civilians lack proper training and resources." "But you weren't here," Grant said quietly. "The proper professionals with the approved equipment were days away. If we'd waited for the right people with the right training, everyone on this ship would be dead. Sometimes close and willing beats perfect and far away." The Admiral had no response to that. He continued his tour, speaking with more humans, trying to understand what had happened. Every answer confused him more. These beings had no military structure, no central command. They had just decided collectively to attempt an impossible rescue. Different countries, different agencies, different individuals, all working toward one goal. He found Rebecca Stone in communication with Earth, coordinating supply transfers. She looked like she had not slept in 2 days, which was accurate. "Dr. Stone, I need to understand something. Your planet received a distress call meant for someone else. You had no obligation to respond. No one would have blamed you for ignoring it, or simply acknowledging the message and explaining you could not help. Why did you come?" Rebecca looked at him with tired eyes. "Because they needed help and we could give it." "Is that so hard to understand?" "Yes," Torin admitted. "In the Coalition, we calculate resource allocation. We determine optimal response strategies. We follow procedures designed for maximum efficiency. What you did was inefficient, dangerous, and violated dozens of regulations. But it worked." "But it worked," he agreed. Rebecca turned back to her communication console. "Admiral, you're going to tell us we can't do this anymore, right? That we broke first contact protocols and now there will be consequences. You understand that your presence in space is now known to the entire galaxy. There will be questions, investigations, diplomatic complications." "Worth it," Rebecca said simply. 3,000 people are alive. That's worth any amount of paperwork. Admiral Torin looked at this exhausted human scientist who spoke about galactic consequences like they were minor annoyances. He thought about the refugees alive in the corridors. He thought about coalition regulations that prioritized procedure over results. "I will file my report," he said finally. "It will say that Earth's inhabitants responded to a distress call with courage and compassion, saving 3,000 lives through determination and improvisation. What the Council does with that information is their decision. Thank you, Admiral." As he prepared to leave, one of the young alien refugees approached him. She held a small item, something a human had made for her from scraps, a toy of some kind. "The human Amy made it for me," the child explained. "She said not to be scared, that everything would be okay." Admiral Torin looked at the crude toy, then at the child's face, then at the humans working throughout the ship. For the first time in his long military career, he wondered if the Coalition's way was really the only way. Maybe there was something to learn from these primitive, reckless, impossible humans who saved lives first and worried about rules later. 6 months after the Windseeker rescue, the galaxy could not stop talking about Earth. The story had spread faster than anyone expected, jumping from planet to planet, system to system. 3,000 lives saved by a species nobody knew existed, using technology that should not have worked, motivated by nothing except the belief that helping was the right thing to do. The reaction split the galaxy in half. In the Coalition Council chambers on the capital world, Counselor Drevin reviewed reports with growing frustration. Since Earth's existence became known, 17 different worlds had formed something called volunteer rescue organizations. Civilians were offering to help with emergencies inspired by the human example. It was causing chaos. "This is unsustainable," he told the assembled council. "We have regulations for rescue operations, trained professionals, calculated response protocols. We cannot have random civilians deciding to involve themselves in dangerous situations." "The humans saved 3,000 lives," another counselor pointed out. "Through luck and recklessness, for every success story there could be 10 disasters. These volunteers have no training, no oversight, no understanding of proper procedures." But the debate was already lost, and Drevin knew it. The refugees from the Windseeker had returned home to planet Orin, and told everyone who would listen about the humans who had risked everything to save them. Captain Doran had become something of a celebrity, giving interviews about the strange aliens who shared their last food rations and sang songs to frightened children. The humans, meanwhile, continued to be themselves in ways that baffled galactic observers. When a mining accident trapped 200 workers on an asteroid colony, Earth responded before the Coalition even finished processing the emergency request. Dr. Amara led a medical team that arrived within hours, treating injured miners while the official rescue was still being organized. The fact that she had no legal authorization to be there seemed irrelevant to her. "People were hurt," she explained later to a confused Coalition official. "We could help. What authorization do you need beyond that?" The official tried to explain liability issues, jurisdiction questions, and proper chain of command. Amara listened politely, then went back to training the colony's medical staff in trauma treatment techniques. She left behind equipment and instructions, making sure they could handle future emergencies themselves. This pattern repeated across multiple systems. A pandemic hit a colony world, and human doctors volunteered despite the biological risks. An agricultural planet faced crop failure, and Earth sent specialists to help develop solutions. A station suffered a reactor breach, and human engineers showed up with creative fixes that broke a dozen safety regulations, but worked perfectly. Every incident created more paperwork for Counselor Drevin. Every success made more aliens question why the Coalition had not been doing things this way all along. Grant Williams found himself recruited by a Coalition engineering corps that wanted to understand his problem-solving methods. They observed him work for a week, taking notes on everything he did. "You do not follow systematic diagnostic procedures," his observer noted. "You just look at things and try solutions without proper analysis." "I analyze while I work," Grant replied, elbow deep in a malfunctioning generator. "See, this connection is loose. I can analyze it for an hour, or I can tighten it now. If that doesn't fix the problem, I'll try something else. But what if your solution creates a different problem? Then I'll fix that too." The observer's report described Grant's methods as chaotic, inefficient, and strangely effective. Coalition engineers spent hours planning repairs. Grant spent hours making repairs. Both approaches worked, but his produced results faster with resources he had available rather than resources he wished he had. Amy Rodriguez became a legend among pilots. She started running training sessions on what she called instinctive flying, teaching aliens to trust their senses and reactions instead of relying completely on computer systems. Computers are great, she told a class of skeptical alien pilots, but they can fail. Your instruments can lie, your sensors can break, your own senses and judgment are the only tools you have that work in every situation. She proved it by flying a simulator through an asteroid field with no computer assistance, just her eyes and hands and instinct. The alien pilots watched in amazement as she threaded through spaces their computers said were impossible to navigate. But the real impact came from Rebecca Stone. The Coalition Council invited her to speak about Earth's intentions in galactic space. They expected a diplomatic speech about peaceful cooperation and following regulations. Instead, Rebecca challenged everything they believed. She stood before representatives of 100 worlds and talked about a concept from her home continent. Ubuntu. I am because we are. The idea that individual survival depends on collective care, that helping others is not charity but necessity. You call us reckless, she said, her voice carrying through the vast chamber. You say we take unnecessary risks? But from our perspective, the real risk is in doing nothing. Every time someone needs help and we ignore them because it's not efficient or it's not our job or it's too dangerous, we make the galaxy a little colder, a little harder, a little less worth living in. And what if your help fails? Counselor Drevin challenged. What if your volunteers die trying to save people they cannot save? Then they die trying, Rebecca replied. Which is better than living knowing they did nothing. Admiral Torren's fleet would have arrived to find 3,000 bodies. Instead, they found 3,000 living people. That difference, that choice to try even when failure was likely, that is what makes us human. But it is not sustainable, Drevin insisted. Your planet has 8 billion people who apparently all think they should involve themselves in every crisis. We have trillions across the galaxy. If everyone adopted your approach, it would be chaos. Maybe, Rebecca agreed. Or maybe it would be a galaxy where help is always close by. Where you don't have to wait days for the proper authorities because your neighbors are already there. Where the first question is not who is authorized to help but who can help. The council chamber erupted in argument. Some called Rebecca naive, claiming her idealism ignored practical realities. Others found her words inspiring, suggesting perhaps the coalition had become too focused on efficiency and forgotten about compassion. But the debate became moot. 3 weeks later, when news reached the council, that changed everything. A star in the ardent sector showed signs of imminent collapse. 7 inhabited worlds with 40 billion people sat in the danger zone. Coalition models predicted a 60% evacuation success rate, given their available resources and time constraints. 16 billion acceptable losses. When Earth received the news, Rebecca made a call to every space-capable nation on her planet. She explained the situation in simple terms. 40 billion people needed to move, and the galaxy said 16 billion would have to die because saving everyone was not efficient enough. The response was immediate and absolute, unacceptable. Within 24 hours, every space-worthy vessel on Earth was being prepared for the longest journey humanity had ever attempted. But this time, Earth was not going alone. This time, Earth had an idea that would force the galaxy to choose between its regulations and its conscience. And for the first time in coalition history, the galaxy was about to learn what happens when you tell humanity that some lives are acceptable losses. The emergency session of the Coalition Council began with grim efficiency. Representatives from 7 worlds sat in designated zones, their faces showing the same expression, quiet desperation. Behind them, holographic displays showed the dying star in the ardent sector, its instability growing with each passing hour. We have 6 weeks, the lead scientist reported. After that, the star will collapse. The resulting radiation and gravity waves will make all 7 planets uninhabitable. We must evacuate 40 billion people. Current resource allocation? Counselor Drevin asked, though he already knew the answer. With our available transport capacity, we can evacuate approximately 24 billion. The remaining 16 billion will need to shelter in underground facilities and hope they survive the initial collapse. Long-term survival rates for those shelters are estimated at 15%. The math was brutal and simple. Most of those left behind would die. But the coalition had strict rules about resource allocation. You saved who you could with what you had. Throwing more resources at an impossible problem just meant more disasters elsewhere. Rebecca Stone watched the session through a live feed from Earth. Next to her, Grant, Amara, and Amy stood with dozens of other humans who had become familiar faces across the galaxy. They listened to the coalition calmly discussing acceptable losses, and their expressions hardened. "They're going to let 16 billion people die," Amy said quietly, just like that. "Because their computers say it's not efficient to save them." "Not if we can help it," Rebecca replied. She opened a communication channel that connected her to every major government on Earth, every space agency, every commercial space company. "This is Rebecca Stone. I need to talk to everyone. Right now." What happened in the next 72 hours would be discussed in history classes across the galaxy for generations. Earth mobilized like it was facing an invasion. Every spacecraft that could carry passengers was pulled from service. Commercial flights were grounded so the pilots could be retrained for space operations. Manufacturing facilities that built satellites started building emergency life support pods. 8 billion humans who 6 months ago had not known aliens existed collectively decided that acceptable losses was not acceptable. But Earth's ships alone would not be enough. Even if every human vessel made a dozen trips, they could maybe evacuate another billion people. The math still did not work. So Rebecca proposed something that had never been done before. She sent a message not to the coalition government, but to the people of the galaxy. To civilians on 1,000 worlds who had been inspired by the Windseeker rescue. To the volunteer organizations that had formed in Earth's wake. To every being with a spacecraft and a conscience. "The coalition says they can save 24 billion people," her message began. "They say 16 billion is an acceptable loss. Earth disagrees. We believe acceptable losses mean zero. We believe that if every civilization contributes just 5% of their civilian spacecraft for 2 weeks, we can evacuate everyone. Not most people, everyone. The coalition will tell you this is impossible. They will say civilians should not involve themselves. They will cite regulations and liability concerns. But 6 months ago they said Earth could not save the Windseeker. We did it anyway. We are not asking your governments for permission. We are asking you, person to person, being to being. If you have a ship that can carry people, come to the Ardent sector. If you can spare supplies, send them. If you can volunteer time, give it. We have 6 weeks to save 40 billion lives. The coalition says we will fail. Let us prove them wrong." The response crashed communication networks across the galaxy. Within hours, civilian ships began converging on the Ardent sector. Cargo haulers that usually moved freight, passenger liners that ran scheduled routes, private yachts owned by wealthy individuals, even small personal craft that could only carry a handful of people. They came by the thousands, then by the tens of thousands. The Coalition Council watched in horror as their carefully organized evacuation plan dissolved into chaos. Millions of untrained civilians were entering a crisis zone with no coordination, no oversight, no command structure. "This is madness," Councillor Drevin said, watching ships arrive from every direction. "They will crash into each other. Resources will be wasted. People will die from this chaos." "People will die from doing nothing," Rebecca replied. She was now in the Ardent sector herself, aboard a human vessel that served as a coordination hub. "So we organized the chaos. What Earth contributed was not just ships, but something more valuable: experience in managing mass volunteer efforts. Humans had been coordinating disaster responses, community aid networks, and volunteer organizations for thousands of years. They knew how to turn good intentions into effective action. Rebecca and her team created a simple system. Every incoming ship reported its capacity and capabilities. They were assigned specific pickup locations based on proximity and efficiency. No complex regulations, no approval committees, just basic logistics and trust. Grant worked with volunteer engineers from a dozen species, teaching them rapid problem-solving techniques. When ships broke down, they fixed them with whatever was available. When life support systems struggled under overcrowding, they improvised solutions. Coalition regulation said passenger capacity was fixed. Grant showed them that passenger capacity was a suggestion that could be exceeded if you were creative and desperate enough. Amara established medical triage stations across all 7 planets, training local volunteers in basic care. The injuries were different, the biology was different, but the principles were the same. Stop bleeding, keep breathing, treat shock, move people quickly but safely. Amy coordinated the pilot network, creating flight paths that maximized efficiency while minimizing collision risks. She ignored coalition traffic control protocols and replaced them with something simpler. Everyone pays attention. Everyone communicates. Everyone looks out for each other. The refugee camps from Planet Oran sent their entire civilian fleet. The humans saved us, their leader said simply. Now we save others. This sentiment echoed across the galaxy. Species that Earth had helped in the past 6 months showed up with everything they had. But even more came from species that had simply been inspired by the story of the Windseeker. Beings who had spent their lives following rules and procedures suddenly found themselves breaking those rules because it was the right thing to do. The coalition military, initially resistant, began providing support when Admiral Torin made a decision that would likely end his career. He ordered his fleet to assist the civilian operation rather than follow official protocols. "Court-martial me if you want," he told Counselor Drevin, "but I will not stand by and watch 16 billion people die when there is an alternative." His ships began running supplies, providing navigation assistance and using their advanced sensors to coordinate the massive civilian fleet. Other military commanders followed his lead. The official coalition response and the unofficial civilian response merged into one massive rescue operation. Counselor Drevin watched from the capital world, torn between protocol and results. Every regulation said this should not work. Civilians were not trained. There was no central command. The logistics were impossible. It should be a disaster, but somehow it was working. Billion by billion, the population of the Ardent sector transferred to safety. Not perfectly, not efficiently, but effectively. Ships made trips they were not rated for. Volunteers worked until they collapsed. People from 100 worlds cooperated who had never met before. And at the center of it all were humans. Those strange aliens from Earth who had responded to a wrong number 6 months ago, and somehow changed the galaxy's idea of what was possible. The star collapsed on schedule, its death throes visible from dozens of light years away. Radiation and gravity waves swept through the Ardent sector, sterilizing 7 planets that had been home to civilizations for thousands of years. Cities crumbled, oceans boiled. Everything humanity had worked to save was destroyed in hours, but the planets were empty. In shelters, in stations, on ships scattered across nearby systems, 40 billion refugees watched their homes die. Every single one of them was alive. Not 60%. Not the calculated acceptable losses. Every last person had been evacuated. 0 acceptable losses. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The largest civilian mobilization in recorded history. Millions of ships from thousands of worlds. Volunteers who took time off from their jobs, spent their savings on fuel, risked their lives for strangers. All because a species called humans had asked for help and shown them it was possible. Counselor Drevin stood on the observation deck of a refugee station, looking at the crowds below. Families from 7 different species wearing a chaotic mix of clothing, from 100 worlds that had contributed supplies. Children playing games taught to them by volunteers from planets they had never heard of. People alive who should have been dead. Rebecca Stone found him there, looking tired but satisfied. She had not slept properly in 6 weeks. "You did something remarkable," Drevin said quietly, "and something dangerous. You have upended every system the Coalition built over thousands of years. Your system was going to let 16 billion people die. Our system was realistic. We saved who we could with the resources allocated for such emergencies. What you did required the entire galaxy to drop everything and focus on one crisis. That is not sustainable." "You are right," Rebecca agreed. "We cannot do this for every emergency. But we did not need to do this for every emergency. We needed to do it once, to show the galaxy that acceptable losses is a choice, not a law of nature." She pointed to the refugees below. "Those people are alive because civilians from 1,000 worlds decided their governments were wrong. Because volunteers refused to accept that some lives matter less than others. You cannot put that back in the box, Counselor. The galaxy has changed." Drevin knew she was right. Reports were already coming in from across Coalition space. Worlds were restructuring their emergency response systems. Civilian volunteer networks were being formally recognized. The regulations he had spent his career upholding were being rewritten by popular demand. "What happens now?" he asked. Earth has become the most influential world in the galaxy, and you have been spacefaring for less than a year. Your technology is still centuries behind most civilizations. You should not have this much power. We do not want power, Rebecca said. We just want to help. 3 months after the Ardent Sector evacuation, Admiral Torrin was not court-martialed. Instead, he was promoted and put in charge of a new coalition program, Integrated Civilian Emergency Response. His first action was to recruit humans as advisors. Grant found himself teaching problem-solving techniques to engineers from species with technology he still barely understood. His message was simple. Fancy tools are great, but creativity and determination matter more. Do not wait for the perfect solution. Use what you have and make it work. Amara established the first interspecies medical training program, where doctors from different worlds learned from each other. Alien physicians learned human adaptability. Human doctors learned alien techniques. Everyone learned that the basics of saving lives transcended species and technology. Amy's pilot training program became mandatory for coalition military, teaching them to trust their instincts and function when computers failed. She had them fly with sensors disabled, navigating by sight and feel, learning that technology was a tool but not a replacement for skill. And Earth continued to be Earth, responding to emergencies with the same reckless determination that had saved the Windseeker. But now they were not alone. They worked alongside volunteers from across the galaxy who had learned that helping was not a job for specialists, but a responsibility for everyone. Rebecca returned to the deep space communications array where it all began. The facility had been expanded, now serving as a hub for coordinating volunteer rescue efforts across multiple star systems. She sat at her old console, reviewing incoming messages, a mining accident on a distant asteroid, a medical emergency on a colony world, a ship in distress near a nebula. Each message was tagged with response status. Professional rescue teams were still important, but now they were backed up by networks of volunteers ready to help, while the professionals traveled. Timothy Wells, who had been there the night they received the first alien message, sat at the console next to her. He was training a young alien intern in communication protocols. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked Rebecca. "When we first got the Windseeker's distress call, we could have just acknowledged the message and said we could not help. Every day," Rebecca admitted, "we almost did nothing. It would have been reasonable, sensible. Nobody would have blamed us. But we went anyway. We went anyway." On the main screen, a new message appeared. It was from a civilian transport that had encountered a derelict vessel. They were not asking for permission to investigate or waiting for authorities to arrive. They were asking for advice on how to safely check for survivors. Rebecca smiled. That was how it should be. The first question was not who was authorized to help, but how to help effectively. She opened a response channel, ready to provide guidance. Around her, the facility hummed with activity. Humans and aliens working together, coordinating rescue efforts, sharing information, building a galaxy where help was always close by. Her console chimed with another message. This one was not a distress call, but a thank you note from a refugee family relocated after the Ardent Sector evacuation. They had included a photo of their new home, their children smiling, alive and safe. Because someone answered a phone call. Because someone decided acceptable losses was not acceptable. Because someone chose to try, even when failure seemed certain. Counselor Drevin had been right about one thing. Earth had changed the galaxy in less than a year. But it was not through military might or advanced technology. It was through a simple idea that resonated across every species. We are all in this together. The galaxy was still dangerous. Stars still died. Accidents still happened. Disasters still struck. But now, when someone called for help, they could be certain someone would answer. Maybe not the closest person. Maybe not the most qualified. But someone who cared enough to try. And usually that was enough. Rebecca's console chimed again. Another distress call. This one from a system she had never heard of. A ship in trouble. People who needed help. She checked the location, calculated response times, and began coordinating available resources. Just another day in the galaxy humans had helped reshape. Just another call that someone needed to answer. She opened the communication channel and spoke the words that had become Earth's unofficial greeting to the cosmos. This is Earth. We received your message. We are coming. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, people who had been alone suddenly had hope, because that was what humans did. They picked up when others called. They showed up when others needed them. They proved again and again that distance and difficulty were not excuses but obstacles to overcome. The galaxy had called Earth by mistake, but it kept calling on purpose, and humanity kept picking up.